can you just imagine like living your whole life where everything that other people like get in an instant, like it takes you a couple more seconds? I don't know. That I feel.
I can absolutely imagine that. That's called my real life.
It's called reality.
Yes.
Well,
it takes very little imagination. I'm barely acting.
that's true. I could just always imagine you and understand, but I don't know.
When I think of Clayton, I think of Joaquin Phoenix. I don't know about you.
Okay, should we jump into it? All right. Okay, so today we're talking about The Master. It's a 2012 movie directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, starring Joaquin Phoenix, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and Amy Adams. Quick synopsis, Joaquin Phoenix plays Freddie Quell. He's a World War II Navy veteran with some documented mental health issues and a penchant for drinking alcohol from some really suspect and dangerous sources, like ethanol fuel, for example.
Paint
thinner, yeah. So he kind of gets himself into a series of self-inflicted catastrophes. Running away from them, he stumbles onto the yacht of Lancaster Dodd, who is a charismatic pseudoscientist who, along with his wife Peggy, played by Amy Adams, is starting a new religion, which we might more accurately refer to as a cult. And so the movie basically explores the relationship of this troubled Freddie Quell and the charismatic cult leader. And yeah, I picked this movie because it's just because of the pedigree of the names, and I had heard and read like good things about it. I mean, it's a very well-regarded movie. Never seen it, never seen much of anything about it. It was like really well designed and well shot, but I did not love the story, like could not get into the story. And like from some preliminary conversating, I know that you guys had, shall we say, similar reactions. So I'm eager to hear like what your reactions were, what you thought about it, and like what what specifically it was about the movie that you didn't really care for.
I couldn't get through this movie. I did try 2 days. I tried. Yeah, I'll take it. I literally
times on the Phantom Train, and I finished.
No, see the problem, like I was watching, I would watch 5 minutes and then I would have to take a break for an hour because I was just so uncomfortable with everything. So I know we usually try to save it to the end, like our actual judgment. I very actively dislike this movie. And I actually don't necessarily want to get into why maybe too much up front, just because maybe you guys have some insight that answers some of the issues I had with it. I will say, like, if the goal was to make the viewer as uncomfortable as possible, they did a great job. Wonderful. What I kept asking myself during all of this and why I was having such a hard time like watching it and trying to get through it is like, what was the point of this movie? What was its intentions other than just like adding more negativity and misery to the world? So maybe it was resolved by the end.
They explained the whole thing by the end.
Okay.
You like literally in the last 5 minutes, you would have totally been like, "Oh, that's why."
Every loose end came together perfectly. It was
every single thing.
See, that's why that's kind of my suspicion. And that's I know, but I just couldn't get there. Darn.
This movie was like a total sucker draw, I think. And what I mean by that is like Clayton was suckered by the names and the caliber that other people say. And I felt like a sucker the entire movie because I kept watching, other than the fact that it was a homework assignment. Like, I still think that had I selected this movie in some crazy world, like when I'm flipping through Netflix, even 25 minutes in, I would have continued watching because as a sucker, I would have really believed that at the end, there's some kind of resolution. I feel like this movie is like a total like trap. It's a trap. The way in which all of the different scenes were like piecemeal, like they were not a continuous story, helped in taking chunks at a time and processing what engages you, and then also throwing away the parts that don't. Like, because I don't know, there's no real story with a conflict and resolution that you have to keep all the pieces for, you know. And
more like like an anthology series or something, like just clips.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And it really felt like a bit of like a voyeuristic look into this guy's life. Like it felt like we were just like opening the door and seeing what he's up to at this point, and then you close it, and then you miss a chunk of time, and then you kind of open the door and see where he's at now and what he's done, and then you close it again. And so in that regard, it's hard to know all the spaces in between that would really make you feel like you either know this character or his story. You don't really get that. You know, you just have that chunked pieces of time where shit happens.
It's like the spaces in between are undefined, and so the relationship of one scene to the next scene is unclear.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't, naturally lead from one scene to the next scene, like building on the previous scenes and flowing in a smooth way.
Surprisingly, that did not bother me at all. Like at least it seemed intentional. So there's a lot of like that I'll forgive. Like even if it's not my preference, it's like, okay, you did it and you are consistent about it, so
right.
Just
that's an aesthetic choice.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the actual stuff that was happening on screen was that's more what threw you off, Morgan.
Yeah, yes. And then absolutely. I mean, it was intentionally making you uncomfortable, and like
Mm-hmm.
I get that, but I have my own limits. So usually what does draw me past that is like knowing that there is a reason why, and maybe and I trust my instincts. I'm pretty good at picking this stuff up as I go. I didn't think that was going to be the case in this movie. Like there was not, unless, well, and also I could be completely wrong about this, of course. There is not really a deeper reason as to why it was making you uncomfortable. It was just, I don't know. To me, it felt like it was a challenge for the audience, and it's like, but to what end?
For the sake of challenging.
Yeah, and if it has no actual intention, then it's just condescending, is how I take it. And I get irritated, and I don't want to finish, and I don't want to watch it.
Fuck you, Paul Thomas Anderson.
But it's like taking the art of filmmaking, or taking the job of filmmaking as an exploration of the art of filmmaking, and then getting like so far up your own butt that you forget that really the job of filmmaking is to tell a story.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes there are cases where there's like intentionally not telling a story, and I feel like this wasn't it either. But that one is, I'll let go also because I didn't finish the movie, so it's not fair for me to say. I need to back down a little bit, but only a little bit.
Down.
I read an article, a review of the movie that took, kind of the highbrow art critique tone, I think in a way that matches kind of the highbrow art artiste motif of the movie itself, and said like Paul Thomas Anderson doesn't worry about answering your questions for you. I'm sure there are lazy viewers out there who would prefer to have the story spoon-fed to them. I'm like, yeah, yep, that's me.
Or at least
I
like
would have
one,
much preferred that.
well, at least answer like maybe one or two of the 150,000 questions you've laid out on the table. Like just answer any question at all would be.
Yeah.
So to get into the movie a little bit, I mean, a couple quick notes. One, this is now the second movie we've watched that opens with some uncomfortable masturbation.
Yeah, a direct parallel to Palm Springs. I don't know. It's just like, and now I'm suddenly much more okay with Palm Springs. You know what's the worst part? The last masturbation wasn't even like the most uncomfortable part. It was the humping and like all the guys around him being very uncomfortable and then him continuing. And I'm like, please just kill me. I can't.
So, I mean, we've established that the story definitely has its downsides for us, but I feel like overall, like by far the strongest part of the movie for me, the most appeal came from the acting performances from the three main, which actually all three of them were nominated for Oscars for this movie. By the
They
way,
should have all gotten one because they were.
Yeah, it is phenomenal acting, and even the scenes where Joaquin Phoenix and Philip Seymour Hoffman are just like playing off each other, like those are, those are my favorite. Even, well, okay, and for some context, like Joaquin Phoenix's character Freddie Quell is a very, very troubled individual, and the most recent Joaquin Phoenix movie I've seen is Joker, and there's a lot of similarities between his characters here, and so I'm starting to just like think that that's who Joaquin Phoenix is.
Someone once pointed out that Robert Downey Jr. plays himself in every movie, and I was like, maybe it's just the same thing with Joaquin Phoenix. He always like laughed. Anytime anyone was laughing, he always like joined in like 2 beats too late, and I was just like, oh.
And he laughs just a little bit too hard.
Yeah.
And it's.
You guys like crack me up in like how uncomfortable you get by like social awkwardness. Like that, I look at that and I'm like, God, this guy is like so sad.
So actually, did you guys know that this movie was his first movie after he did that performance art whole Michigas? Okay, do you remember the whole thing he did back in the day, like around 2010?
When he was acting very like weird in public, like consistently.
Yes, like he was a guest on talk shows and was acting basically like Freddie Quell, as Joaquin Phoenix on these talk shows, like sticking his gum underneath the desk of the host. And
I remember that red carpet interviewer was like, "Is there a toad in my hair? Is there?" And everyone's like, "Is he on drugs? Like, is he okay?"
Yeah.
What was the result of? I don't know anything about it, but what at the end of it, did he have an explanation? Like, ta-da!
Yeah.
I was.
Yeah, he was method acting.
Casey Affleck were making a mockumentary about what would happen if Joaquin Phoenix went off the deep end, so to speak, and retired from acting to focus on his career as a hip hop artist. And so he was going, like, doing all this stuff, and it was being filmed as part of this mockumentary, which was the name of the movie is I'm Still Here. And it came out 2010, 2011, I think. And Joaquin Phoenix was like, yeah, after that, I kind of had a hard time getting jobs. So this was his first acting job after that came out.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
With my frustrations with the movie, I got caught up a lot in like the choices of the filmmaker, like why he decided to do things this way. And And then so like while on one hand I was like very like the acting was great and all this, on the other hand like, and where it's just like I wanted to be immersed in this movie except for the part where I absolutely did not want to because terrible people, but on the other hand I kept being drawn out of it by the like filmmaker themselves, you know, kind of like in turn, whereas just I wonder if you guys like kind of struggled with that too, or if you were ever kind of taken out of like actually watching the movie and wondering why certain choices were made.
I didn't have that experience with this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think it kept me like it kept me wondering why choices were made, but it strictly related to what was on screen. Yeah, to the characters, not like actual filmmaking choices, I guess.
Or I guess storytelling choices is, I kept saying filmmaking, but I guess it was the storytelling choices.
Okay, yeah.
The storytelling was like right there, because it's like I was flirting with the almost grasping that it's like an exploration of a guy suffering from like mental health issues and somebody else who is struggling from an identity crisis, if you will, like Philip Seymour Hoffman's like kind of reconciling with his falsehood as well as his like creating his own reality of like this cult and whatever, and then like finding and like clutching to Freddie as like this beacon of like fuck society. Like it was like I was just right on the tip of my tongue of like grasping that exploration, that dichotomy, that dynamic, that all of that. But it's just it was like right there. Mm-hmm. And it just missed over all of it. I just didn't quite grasp it ever.
So that actually touches on what I think is the core of this movie. Like, I think this movie is about the relationship between Freddie Quell and Lancaster Dodd, the cult leader. I think basically like that is the point of the movie. Just like exploring that relationship. What did you guys think of that relationship? Like, what did it make you think of? Because there are like so many ways you could go with it. It's like, you know, is there like a paternalistic element to it? Does, you know, Freddie see Dodd as like this father figure? There's obviously the master / acolyte relationship. Mm-hmm. Like Freddie gets swayed by Dodd's charisma and becomes a believer in the cult, but it's more like Freddie is just a believer in Dodd, not the cause necessarily. There's a way. I mean, you could look at it and say, you know, does Dodd see a version of himself in Freddie? Like, is that what draws him to this, you know, almost irredeemable fuck up of a person? There's like, does he genuinely think that he can help or save Freddie? Like, is that what he's working on? Like, and there's even like a romantic or a sexual subtext there between the two of them. And it's like all of these things are there or there for interpretation, I guess. And I was just wondering, like, what did you guys, what do you think the relationship was with them?
He treats Freddie as his muse. And so I think there's kind of like in that kind, especially him and his little poisons, his potions, that's what he calls them. So I just got to the part where he beat the hell out of the guy who was like, excuse me, mm-hmm. excuse me, at the party.
You're referring to Pig Fuck.
Yes, to Dear Mr. Pig Fuck.
Spoiler alert, but the fallout to that was, you're so naughty, Freddie.
I'm not
thing to do.
Not super surprised, but also still uncomfortable.
What a horrid naughty boy you were.
But so yeah, they're still very much in the stage of whatever, like they're kind of like new to each other. So that whole muse and whatever. That's the no deeper insight currently.
For me, the one time I had clarity in the movie beyond what was just being beyond just absorbing what was being presented is at the wedding. Lancaster tells that story about like fighting the dragon and like putting the leash on it and like making it sit and roll over and play dead, whatever. And at that moment, I shit you not, I was like, he's telling the story of him wrangling Freddy.
But it cuts right to Freddy. I mean, the filmmaking definitely supports that.
Was that the one bit of storytelling in this movie?
Yes, and it was from a character's mouth. So, and so, you know, now for the rest of it, I don't know if he was his muse or if he was his drug dealer with the hooch. I don't know if they were lovers. Is there even a relationship at all? Because the reason why is, again, this is toward the end, Morgan, so you wouldn't know this part, but when he's in the movie theater and he gets the phone call and Lancaster Dodd's like, I miss you, come to England, you know, you'll really like it here, whatever. And Freddy goes there. I'm pretty certain all of that was in his head. So that being said, the jail scene, I think, was fake. I think Lancaster Dodd was actually brought out of jail like immediately. Meanwhile, Freddy stayed in there for a while and like faced his demons about this. And I question how much of their one-on-one time was real or was Freddy filling in blanks that he didn't know how to fill in otherwise. So I kind of wanted to go back and flip through some scenes to see if this holds water, but I could not fathom watching this movie again, even in other
subjecting yourself to that movie.
So I didn't, but I do wonder because I believed that phone call. I really believed that phone call until there was evidence and indications that that phone call conversation never happened, which makes me question some of the other scenes that we were privy to that may not have actually happened at all.
That's interesting. Yeah, I did not question any of the other scenes at all. I barely questioned that one, but then Rach, she questioned an earlier scene where Dodd's daughter sits down beside Freddy and like gropes his crotch. And she was like, oh, you think that was real, or is that just another one of Freddy's sexual fantasies? Like the nude part. Yeah. And I was like, oh, well, that actually makes way more sense if that's the case, because it made zero sense at any point in the movie for her to really have done that. But I don't know.
Well, but that's the whole thing about this movie, where the narrator, in a sense, that you're following is a completely unreliable narrator, right? Yeah. So how much of what's transpiring is based on his wishes, based on his fears and whatever, and how much of it is real?
Yeah. I mean, it makes as much sense as any interpretation I have of the movie, that's for sure. Also, like, basically everything about the cult has a direct analog to Scientology. Like the time hole, the going back in time to all your past lives.
But those are also things that aren't necessarily unique to Scientology. So I don't know.
But they are present. They are present in Scientology. Like,
well, I'm sorry. I just mean that it's not, that he could have he could have explored more. I guess that's just what I was agreeing with.
Is this supposed to be an L. Ron Hubbard biography-ish?
Yeah.
You know, is this about the beginnings of Scientology? And it's like, well, I mean, it's obviously based on
There are
L.
some
Ron Hubbard.
parallels.
Yeah, there are several parallels, but it's like there's no I can't see any possible interpretation where this is supposed to be like a factual representation of
Right.
the founding of Scientology. It's like, no, that's just the setting that Paul Thomas Anderson used.
And wrote fan fiction, his own fan fiction. Sorry.
We haven't even touched on like Freddie's main driving motivation throughout the movie, which is his love for the 16-year-old Doris, who apparently was in love with him back in the day, and then he ran away and came back 7 years later and was surprised to find that she wasn't there waiting for him.
The Doris story, honestly, I felt was unnecessary in that, like, it like almost wanted to give Freddie Quell like a different dimension, right? Like that he wasn't always drinking fucking paint thinner and he wasn't always whatever. But I did not find it successfully engaging and connected enough to matter. Like the whole Doris story could have just gone away and I would not have missed a beat.
I will say disagree with that just a little bit because he was so inconsistent with her. I feel like that is still in keeping with like the character, like his character throughout the rest of the, of at least the beginning half of the movie. I feel like I still have to qualify. It's like, I'm sorry, yes, I only did watch half. But it was, he was very weird and inconsistent with her, even so. And I will just say like that part of it is another aspect of the movie that took me out of like, even as uncomfortable as I was, like sitting and like watching and being in the movie, to like, why the fuck did they make this choice to have this grown-ass man like kissing and like this 15-year-old girl? Like what? 15, 16-year-old girl, whatever, the sophomore. I was like, what were the choices? What were the motivations? Why did anyone think this was a good idea? And like, it did not illustrate enough of a point, because like you said, it was completely forgettable, that it seemed important. It just seemed gross.
I feel like that whole relationship was an attempt at showing the last time Freddie was grounded. Like the fact that like he had some place to go to where there was a consistent girl waiting for him, writing him letters while he was gone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I guess the point is that if that was why there even was a Doris, it was weak.
Okay, well, you know what? Let's wrap things up on The Master. I think we all have a pretty similar opinion of it. That being said, what do you guys think about screening it at a film festival event?
I would sooner screen another Yorgos Lanthimos movie before I would screen this. And you know how much I hate him.
I feel like there's a lot of similarities between this and a Yorgos Lanthimos movie. I
will say at least Yorgos. At least his storytelling is consistent. And like the different pieces in it has significance, and I did not feel that with this movie. But yeah, hard no for me.
I would disagree though, because first of all, I love Yorgos, and the reason why is because all of the choppiness of a Yorgos film is like a chapter of a book, and so it's like every scene, when it's end scene, it feels like there was an end to that chapter. Some character's motivation was slightly more revealed. Some plot twist was, perpetuated just a little bit further. And there was just enough clues that you're like, okay, logged, next one, versus this one, again, that whole voyeuristic thing where it really is, it felt like there was a whole movie and I was just scrolling and then like stopping randomly at different parts of the movie.
Okay, but would you screen The Master?
No. The answer is a resounding no. Mostly because while we were able to have a discussion on it, I don't feel like it was the kind of discussion that is meaningful in a dialogue discourse sort of way. It's a discussion because we were
confused and unsettled.
Yeah, confused and unsettled. But when you come away from it, it didn't feel like it was it wasn't an explorative kind of dialogue where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, like, you know, meaning of life is a little bit less obscure to me now, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Or a little bit more, but in a good way.
In a good way, exactly. You know.
That's a good point. So I was going the opposite direction. I like, again, even though I did not like this movie, did not enjoy the experience, I would screen it because of the like the technical mastery, and B, because it does generate conversation. But I do see your point, Sue. It's like, yeah, is this the kind of conversation we want to generate?
Your final verdict did that end up being a no? Or
No, he said yes.
No, I'm a yes.
Guys, is that the wrap? It's officially the wrap. I am off to bed.
Yes. Nighty night.
Bye.
Good talk.
Love you guys.
Good one, Morgan.
I enjoyed myself.
Thank you for sharing that on camera, Morgan.
Someone has to find me funny. Who cares if it's just me?
I'll have you know that one person finds you hilarious.
Clayton.
Yes. Okay, two people. You and me.
Oh my God.